sports legal analyst, joining us right now. Ottawa-based sports legal analyst. Eric Macramala, good morning.
Good morning, Tony. Ottawa-based, but originally from Montreal and Habs fan.
All right. Why don't you make people aware of your blog?
That blog is located at sportslawblog.ca. And at the blog, we've got a lot of coverage of the Pacioretty incident. Also on Twitter at Eric on Sports Law. So I welcome everyone to attend. And I actually have a one blog entry where I invite comments from the public on the Pacioretty incident to get their input and their comments. And so far I've been flooded with a lot of emails, and some of them are quite long and passionate, as you can imagine.
All right. This whole incident between Chara and Pacioretty, he wasn't suspended, but a criminal investigation has been launched and all that stuff. Is there a case when the respective league in which the player plays in has taken no action whatsoever?
Tony, I think when we look at the issue, I think it's important to understand what the criminal charge would be, because then we can understand what's the likelihood or how unlikely it is that a charge may materialize or that they would be successful. So I'm guessing here what we would see is a charge for assault causing bodily harm. That's what we saw in the Cormier case, we saw in the Bertuzzi case, that's what we saw in McSorley and Ciccarelli. When you look at that criminal charge of assault, it has two elements, Tony. The first is that you have to show that Chara intentionally applied force to Pacioretty. And number two, that Pacioretty didn't consent to that force. And this issue of consent is huge here, and that's where this all sort of turns on. In hockey, Tony, when you step on the ice, you consent to some sort of form of bodily contact and harm, and the risk that flows from that. So you're consenting to incidental contact. That is contact that is part of the game, slashing, body checking, and things like interference. However, hockey players, when they step on the ice, they don't consent to hits that are not part of the game. They're not considered an acceptable part of the game. So headhunting, for example. So Bertuzzi hunting down Moore, hitting in the back of the head and driving his face into the ice. Players don't consent to that. McSorley on Brashear, no consent. So the issue here is, did Pacioretty, this is again from a criminal perspective only, did Pacioretty consent to Chara's hit? Now look, this isn't a black and white issue, and it falls in a gray area.
I don't quite understand that. Did Pacioretty consent to Chara's hit?
Yeah,
explain that to me.
Okay, so when players step on the ice, there is an implied consent that they consent to contact and harm on the ice, because hockey is understood to be a violent game. Mm-hmm. That legal principle is called a voluntary assumption of risk. So when you engage in different activities, Tony, depending on what they are, each activity has its own level of risk attributed to it. Hockey has a level of risk attributed to it such that when you play, you understand that if you get checked, or you get hit, or you get slashed, that's part of the game. So when you step on the ice, there is an implied consent to those types of acts, but there is not a consent to acts that are so far outside the scope of what is acceptable in hockey, such as Bertuzzi punching Moore in the back of the head and driving his face into the ice. So if Bertuzzi had done that to Pacioretty, we would reasonably say that Pacioretty did not consent to that hit. Okay, it's not a verbal consent, it's just implied. So in this case here, we have to ask, was Chara's hit, was it such that we could reasonably assume that Pacioretty consented to it? And that's what this turns on. It's not a black and white case, it's gray, but ultimately, Tony, I would be very surprised to see charges materialize here. And if they did, if charges were pressed, I would be extremely surprised to see Chara lose. And the reason I say that, again, just from a criminal standpoint, is that when you look at the hit, it wasn't of the same nature of Bertuzzi or McSorley. And those traditionally are the types of cases where the prosecution is successful. Here, if you look at the hit, at the incident, as two separate events, and that's how I suspect it would be looked at.
Okay, now if he would have said, which would have been highly unlikely, but yes, I knew it was him. Yes, I meant to hit him. I made a mistake. At that point, is he in trouble?
No, he's not in trouble, because even if he intended to hit him, Did he intend to steer him into the stanchion and ram his face into it? That's the second part. That's the second event I'm talking about. The first event is making contact. The second event is ramming his face into the stanchion. He's saying, look, I didn't do that. I hit him. It's unfortunate we were on the only part of the ice where there was that stanchion. If I committed that exact same infraction, and it was interference call, right, 5-10 in a game, anywhere else on the ice, we would have had the same result. Now, on the flip side, others would argue, I see that hit, that incident, as one event. I see Chara hitting Pacioretty and then guiding him into the stanchion and ramming his face into the stanchion. So they see it as one single event. And in a circumstance like that, it's not unreasonable to say, well, maybe that was assault. But that's unlikely how it is going to be seen.
Okay, so if we take a look at the history, the buildup, from the clips that, from the television guy saying 67's now a target, he's got to have his head taken off. From a member of the media saying, I know that the Boston Bruins haven't digested Max Pacioretty and what he did to Zdeno Chara. From the February 9th game where he got the two-hander right in the back of the legs and had to leave and go to the locker room. When he was tied up with Kampfer and Chara went after him. When Chara comes out and says, I didn't know it was him on the ice, when he steps into it and frame by frame and then he gives that last push where the partition is. If a Boston Bruin player would say, yeah, Pacioretty was a target. I mean, you just added all on and all on and all on and all on. At the end of the day, there still would be no case.
I think it's unlikely that they would succeed, because if you look at these types of cases and how they're prosecuted, this one doesn't sort of fall in the realm of, the prosecution is likely to succeed. Now, Tony, I completely understand.
Because it seems to me there is a ton of circumstantial evidence here. Not that I'm encouraging a court case. I'm just saying it seems to me there's a ton of circumstantial evidence here.
There is a history here, and it goes back to when Pacioretty scored that goal in OT and shoved Chara a bit from behind and came after him, and then he was targeted thereafter. Absolutely. And on my blog, I freeze the frame. If you're looking at the game across the red line, I freeze it, and I show you that when Chara hit Pacioretty inside the red line, the puck was at the blue line. So it's obviously a late hit. It's obviously interference. He was trying to punish Pacioretty, but was he trying to kill him? I don't think so. I don't think that would be the position. However, Chara was being reckless, and being reckless isn't the same as criminal assault. They're two separate things. Assault, think of it this way. I'm Bertuzzi. Hey, I want to fight you, Tony. I chase you around the rink, and I finally punch you in the back of the head and ram your face into the ice. That's criminal assault causing bodily harm. I inflicted this force on you without your consent. The Chara hit, it's gray, I agree. But it was interference, and he wasn't separating Pacioretty from the puck. But was he headhunting? I don't know. I think it's a tough case. So I think if charges were pressed, I would be very surprised if they were successful.
Appreciate you taking the time. Once again, your blog?
Sportslawblog.ca.
And you are on Twitter as well?
I'm on Twitter, Eric on Sportslaw.
We appreciate taking the time.
Thanks, Tony.